and put on, of course, by the Collectors Education Program at PCGS. I'm the director, and I'd like to thank Phil Arnold for the wonderful photographs, and of course Steve for hosting the webinar. So we're going to just move straight into the preview here. We sort of start by asking why grade coins, and that sort of may seem like a silly question, but if you think about it, it will help frame the course a little bit. The first thing to do, it helps communicate the appearance of a coin. As an example, take a look at these two coins. Other than the date, of course, which is different, but without grading, there really wouldn't be a really good way to distinguish them. They're basically both the same type of coin. Obviously, the one on the left has seen a lot of work. The one on the right has probably sat in a roll for a good many years. Grading helps establish relative rarity. Okay, in other words, if you look at a typical population graph of a coin, you see that mint state 63 and 64 coins may be relatively common, where by the time you get to 66 or 67, you're dealing with an extremely rare coin. So systematic grading helps us understand the rarity of coins. This is a typical graph. There are some coins where the graph is almost the exact opposite. Some of the brand new silver eagles, for example, mint state 69 and 70s are our most common grades. So every coin has a unique rarity profile. And finally, grading helps us to determine the approximate value of a coin, which is important to collectors, of course, because they want to acquire coins. This is a typical graph of a coin where you see in MS 63 and 64, the coin may be relatively inexpensive, and by the time you get up to 66 or 67 up here, you're dealing with a pretty expensive coin. And once again, grading helps categorize these coins by their value. So let's look quickly here first at the elements of grading. In other words, what goes in to grading a coin. Okay, and there's two basic categories of coins. There's mint state coins and there's circulated coins. We'll first look at mint state coins and see that they're graded by the interaction and balance of four components that we here at PCGS look at. First is the surface preservation, or the number of marks on the coin. These could be bag marks, these can be light gouges or dings, or almost anything that sort of happens to a coin short of being circulated. So that's really the key component of a mint state coin grade, is the preservation of the surface. We take a look at strike, in other words, how much of the design was struck into the coin. As you'll see later, not all coins are created equal, and some coins struck from worn dies or a weak coining press, which often the branch mints had to put up with, will not be very well struck. So we look at strike as part of the grade. Third thing we take a look at is luster. Okay, luster is sort of how the light plays off the surface of the coin, and of course we'll go into more detail on that in just a minute. But luster is the third component, and our last component is eye appeal. And I put toning in parentheses because that's sort of the quick and dirty way you look at eye appeal, is sort of toning and sort of what the coin looks like. Eye appeal actually is almost a combination of all three of the above things taken as a package. So we'll discuss eye appeal a little bit as well. In circulated coins, it's a little more simple. Circulated coins are graded by the presence or absence of design elements, which is a really fancy way of just saying where. In other words, as a coin circulates and moves around in commerce, it is progressively worn away, and you lose elements of the design. And of course, by the time you get to a very low grade, such as fair or poor, you have virtually nothing left. So circulated coins are graded primarily by wear and also eye appeal. And that's something that some people don't fully appreciate, but a circulated coin can be a pretty circulated coin or an ugly circulated coin, and we'll of course take a look at those as well. So that's the basic elements that make up grading. So let's take a little closer look at all of these. Here are our four components of mint state coin grading and their approximate level of importance. You see here in blue the surface preservation is really about 60% or so of the grade. That's pretty much where things are started. You see strike and luster over here make up a component, and finally eye appeal is your last component. So we'll take a look at these quickly one by one. Surface preservation is a result of the type of handling the coin received after being struck, okay? And that consists sort of small scratches, gouges, scrapes seen on uncirculated coins are usually the result of bag marks. Now, as you know, coins are struck on a press. They fall into a big bin or a vat, then they're moved into bags. The bags are moved around, and all this causes the coins inside to hit each other. And as they hit each other, they acquire marks. And the coins that were on top of the bag and didn't get hit very much are going to be higher grade generally than the ones that were in the middle or on the bottom that got a lot of contact with other coins. So that's where we discussed in the second paragraph. They're acquired through contact with other coins while being transported in kegs or bags. Large coins like silver dollars and double eagles are the most vulnerable because they're the heaviest. The other coins are heavier and they hit them. They have large exposed areas of surface, and they're of course going to be the ones that you're going to most likely see bag marks on. However, bag marks can happen on any coins. It's just generally on dimes or nickels or pennies. You don't really have the problem that you would on double eagles or silver dollars. Bag marks aren't the only surface preservation issue. You've got cabinet friction from storage in the older cabinets, slide friction from albums or flips, roll friction, or sometimes a coin will be wiped to pick up some hairline. So surface preservation covers a multitude of sins. And finally, we note that light friction on a coin doesn't always preclude it from being uncirculated. That may sound like a contradiction, but you often see that on bust halves where it looks like you have a little bit of rub on the cheek. That usually came from a roll or being stored in a cabinet, not really being circulated. That's sort of a subtle distinction which the full course takes a little better look at. So let's first take a look at a few silver dollars in various states of surface preservation. Right now you're looking at a Morgan dollar that had a pretty tough life in a bag. You see the surface is pretty heavily marked. You see a particularly heavy scratch right in front of the face here. The devices, which is this central head, is pretty covered with scratches. The fields are pretty heavily covered. This coin would basically be your mint state 60 or 61 coin, okay? It's heavily marked. And oddly enough, if you look at our pop reports, you'll notice that we haven't graded a lot of mint state 60 and 61 Morgans, mainly because they're only worth a small premium over melt, really. And with our grading fee, it really doesn't pay anyone to send a coin that looks like this to us to have them tell them that it's worth about $25 or $30 because it's kind of evident. I mean, the coin's sort of worth that by default, and to pay us to tell them that isn't a very good use of money. So even though our populations of these types of coins isn't very large, there's an awful lot of these kind of coins out there. They're just usually not in holders. Moving up the scale a little bit to what we'd call fair surface preservation, this would be a lower end uncirculated coin in the mint state 61 or 62 range. You see the face is pretty heavily covered with scratches. The fields have a lot of scratches on them as well, but they're not nearly as heavy as the previous coin. But a coin like this is what we would just call an average uncirculated coin. Nothing special, certainly not choice or gem. By the time we get up to average surface preservation, which we would set a base grade here of about a 63 or 64 range coin, you see the fields are pretty clean. The cheek isn't bad. I mean, there's some marks. There's a mark down here, a couple marks up here. But overall, you're looking at a coin that's starting to get fairly attractive. It's certainly not heavily covered with scratches. And the marks that it has are getting pretty light. So this is your basic 63, 64 coin, and this is where the quality of the coin starts to be worth submitting to PCGS, particularly in a Morgan dollar. Moving a little further up the scale to the 65, 66 range, you note now that the cheek is getting pretty clean. You've got a few light marks scattered around the fields. But overall, you know, you take a quick look at the coin and you feel like this is a pretty darn nice looking coin. As I said, it's not a perfect coin, and 65s and 66s are not perfect coins by any stretch of the imagination, but it's certainly well into the choice range and borderline to the gem range. And then finally, of course, we have the exceptional coin. This is an outstanding example of a Morgan dollar. A coin like this would be in the 67, 68, 69 category. You see the cheek is virtually perfect. The fields are virtually perfect. Just a very few scattered light marks. You know, you've got a little scraping down here, a few tiny light marks here. And of course, if these weren't here, the coin would then approach MS 68, 69 range. So that's the basic look at surface preservation of a Morgan dollar. Moving now to strike. That is our second area that we take a look at, and strike can be weak due to several factors. The most common reason that strike is found weak is worn dies. As a die is used, the high points of the design slowly get flattened out. And as a coin die strikes hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of coins, the finest points of the design end up getting weaker and weaker and weaker because it's metal striking metal, and it's going to cause a little bit of wear on the die. So that the last coins struck by the die are not going to be nearly as sharp as the first coin struck from the die. The second reason that you'll get a weak strike is inadequate striking pressure from the coining press. And as I mentioned before, a lot of times you find this on branch mint coins because they got either used presses from Philadelphia or presses that just weren't in as good a shape. So that's why you see very often on, you know, certain S-mint nickels are found very weakly struck, or some O-mint silver dollars sometimes are weakly struck. That's kind of why you're seeing that. Improper spacing of the dies, in other words, when they set the dies up to strike the coin, if they're a tiny bit too far apart, you're not going to get quite the pressure that you need from the dies, and the metal filling in will not be completely thorough. So that's why you also can get a weak strike. If you space the dies too closely, you'll get a very sharp strike that the dies will wear very quickly. So this was manually set by the press operator. And as I said, if it's late in the day and the guy's tired, or it's a hot day and they're not in the mood, sometimes the die spacing isn't quite perfect. So that's another reason for a weak strike. And then lastly, a slight irregularity in the planchet, or the blank, will sometimes cause a weakly struck coin. If it was rolled a little tiny bit too thin, sometimes you won't quite get the full strike of the coin. And as a general rule, keep in mind that hard metals such as nickel are going to have more striking issues than a soft metal such as gold. You very often see a poorly struck nickel coin. You seldom see a poorly struck gold coin. They exist, but not nearly as serious a problem as nickel. Now, taking a look at nickels, well, we have 5 nickels here. We're just going to show 2 of them. I'm going to show you the poor strike and the full strike. Now, looking at this strike, you see this coin looks like it's heavily worn. There's almost no fur visible on the head. Even the tip of the horn is invisible. The face of the buffalo is blurry. All this hair on the back of the buffalo looks worn away. The lettering around the edges is almost illegible. The top half of the parts of the letters are not even struck. You can barely read 5 cents here, or the nit mark down here. This is an exceptionally poorly struck coin, but not something that is never seen, of course. But it's a very mushy strike. And of course, a coin like this, even if it had very few marks, is not going to get a very high grade from PCGS simply because collectors would prefer a coin with a better strike than this. If this is your one 1926S Buffalo nickel, for example, you want one that looks more like this. This is a fully struck Buffalo nickel. You notice here the tip of the horn is sharp. You've got whole lot of detail in the fur, in the head, the split in the tail back here. Look at the lettering here. It's all very sharp, even at the tops of the letters, very clear. Everything is razor sharp. And of course, you see by the mint mark, the D mint mark, this is not approved. So you can get a mint state buffalo nickel that is struck like this. So it's quite a difference between the weakly struck and the fully struck. Of course, there's some other intermediate degrees of strike, which we cover in the full class, but you get the idea. A well-struck coin is a better coin than a weak-struck coin. Next area that we take a look at is luster. And luster is how the surface of the coin reflects the light. Okay? Now, when a coin is struck, it is struck under very high pressure, and that causes the metal on the plancha to actually move, and it flows into the recesses of the die that it's striking, and it creates very fine, small stress lines. These stress lines, when looked at in the light, are sort of what give you what's known as the cartwheel effect. Okay? That's where it sort of looks like an hourglass that sort of swirls around the coin, especially on a large coin like a double eagle or a silver dollar, because you've got a lot of surface area to see. It's very easy to see that. And that is what causes a coin to have a perception of very great luster, is when you get that fully original surface with the stress lines and the light flowing off those lines, creating that cartwheel effect. Poor striking pressure, over-polishing of the dies, an underweight planchet, or repeated dipping causes the luster to look very flat or dull or lifeless. And again, collectors prefer to have a coin with nice, booming, exciting-looking luster. Now, luster can be tough to illustrate in photographs because it involves reflection of light. In a photograph, you can't swirl the coin around to watch the light move on it. However, we'll attempt to show what a very poor luster coin looks like and what a very good luster coin looks like. And again, we have 5 intermediate steps, but we'll look at the low and the high end. This is a coin that's uncirculated. It's a 1917 Walker, but you can sort of see it's sort of dull and dingy and just does not have a whole lot of luster on the coin. Okay, it's a very flat-looking coin, and there's very little play of light off it. So this coin, even if it again was pretty well struck or did not have a lot of marks, is not going to get an extremely high grade from PCGS because the luster is so dull and dead. Of course, now at the other end of the scale, we have outstanding luster. Okay, and here you can hopefully see the effect of the light on the coin. You see the shadow and the dark areas of the coin here, and the very intense bright areas of the coin here. Now, of course, if you could move the coin under the light, you would see all this light pattern sort of swirl around, and that is what great luster looks like. And this coin, again, is an example of a coin, you know, what we would call booming luster or vibrant luster. And of course, it's very desirable. It's very fresh. So this is the kind of coin that we would certainly like to see. The last area that we'll take a look at is eye appeal. And that's often manifested, as I said earlier, in the toning or the color of the coin. And that's a fairly subjective call. Everybody doesn't always like the same toning. In other words, what I personally might like, some other person might think is too dark or dull. What other people may like, a vibrant rainbow, to me may look a little bit, you know, too much tone. So eye appeal does have some subjectivity. Like I said, while the most attractive toning is an asset, not everyone agrees on what is attractive. Dark, somber toning to some is unattractive. To others, it's the sign of an original, undisturbed surface. And eye appeal is also sort of used as a catch-all. In other words, it's sort of the overall look of the coin. When you just look at the coin, is it a coin that makes you smile or not? So there's that aspect of eye appeal. And finally, newer coins, you know, those struck in the last 40 or 50 years, are usually preferred by most collectors as fully brilliant. I know that Mercury dimes, Walkers, coins like that, a lot of collectors like to have them brilliant. Now, that usually means at one point or another the coin's been dipped, because even a Mercury dime now is going on 75 years old, 65, 75 years old, and if it's a silver coin that hasn't been cleaned in that length of time, it may acquire some natural toning. But be that as it may, most collectors like their later 20th century coins to be pretty brilliant. Because eye appeal is subjective, once again, we'll sort of illustrate with several photographs. Now here, I'm going to show you 3 coins that we consider to have poor or negative eye appeal. Now, there may be some out there that think some of these are attractive. I would sort of maintain you're in the minority. This peace dollar here, this Morgan dollar here, this Boone commemorative, by most people's estimates, are not attractive coins. The toning does not help these coins. So we would consider these coins to have negative eye appeal, and it would probably impact the final grade in a negative manner. And then at the other end of the spectrum, once again, we're going to skip the middle areas and just show you what we might consider to be great eye appeal. Seated dollar here, or these 2 Morgan dollars here, have vibrant and very colorful toning. Once again, as I said, the coin on the far right may not be everybody's cup of tea. And some people may think it's absolutely gorgeous, and some people may say, I really don't like it. So again, that reflects somewhat the subjectivity of eye appeal. But once again, be that as it may, we would consider these coins probably to have better, have pretty good eye appeal, and it might help boost the grade up a little bit on a coin like this, especially if it was on the line. So those are the components of mint state grading. And let's take a quick run through the mint state Morgan dollars just to give you a feel for what the 60 through 67 Morgan dollar might look like. This coin we saw once before in the surface preservation section, and I think it sort of speaks for itself. It's a mint state 60, heavy marks and scratches over the entire surface, a couple of deep scratches, and overall just not the choicest coin on the block. It's a typical mint state 61 coin. You see a lot of heavy marks and scratches both in the fields and on the face. And the eagle's breast over here on the reverse you see has a pretty deep cut. A couple of rim nicks and cuts. Once again, I would consider this to be a below average uncirculated coin. And certainly no better than 61 for this. By the time you get to 62, you see the coin starting to clear up. There's still quite a few scratches, quite a few marks on the coin. You see some spots on the back, spots in the fields, quite a bit on the cheek here. But the marks are not as heavy, they're not as numerous, and there are even a few areas like upper fields here, or especially the back fields, where there's really no marks at all. A 62 is probably pretty close to an average uncirculated coin, but as I said, in areas like Morgan dollars, our population still may not be as high as the 63s or 4s, but that's simply a function of economics and what coins get submitted to us. Here's the 63. 63 is kind of average to slightly above average, and you see by now the fields are getting pretty clear. You can certainly see the marks. It's not a coin that you have to look carefully for the marks, but the overall appearance of the coin is no longer one that you look at and feels like been beaten to death. Okay, it's really a pretty decent coin. Here's a 64. Now at this point you can see some chatter on the cheek, a little bit of marks in the fields, particularly in the recessed areas here, but most of the marks are pretty light. And the coin at this point can be considered to be certainly an above average uncirculated coin, kind of borderline choice coin for a 64. Here's a 65. The devices at this point are only showing minimal marks, a few scattered marks in the fields. But overall, this is sort of the threshold that sort of starts the nice uncirculated coins. For years, the battle cry was buy 65 or better. I don't know that that's totally operative in all fields right now, but 65 is pretty well considered to be a pretty choice to gem uncirculated coin. So this is going to be an average Morgan dollar in 65. By 66, you're looking at very, very few marks, and a coin now that is unquestionably in the gem category. It's not flawless, of course. You're going to see marks scattered here, a few little light marks on the face and the cheek, but in general, it's a pretty darn nice coin. This is an exceptionally nice cheek on this coin with very few light marks. And by mint state 67, you even have fewer marks. The cheek here at this point is practically perfect. The reverse has very, very few marks once again, almost nothing on the devices or in the hair. And a coin like this, you're starting to see some very rapid price escalation. Even a common date Morgan dollar in 67 is a pretty expensive coin. And finally, we'll look at a 68, and that's an extremely scarce coin. Our population on Morgans drops off extremely sharply from mint state 68. And you can see you almost have to look at this coin for a while to find the marks. You have a minuscule mark here, tiny little mark here, almost nothing on the cheek. The reverse is virtually perfect, a tiny little rim nick here. But it's certainly an exceptional coin, and like I said, the price on a mint state 68 Morgan, even a common date, is going to set you back quite a bit. So that's sort of the range of Morgan dollars from 60 to 68. Now we'll move on quickly to circulated coin grading, and circulated coin grading is almost entirely a function of wear. Okay, eye appeal will play some part in it, but the overwhelming criteria for a circulated coin is going to be wear. We'll start with a poor 1, and these are the coins with less than 5% of the detail showing. That's this dark area down here in the graph. And this here is the percent of detail visible, and this heavy graph here is going to show as the grade goes from 0 or 1 up to 60, how the amount of detail goes from 100% down to 0 or 0 to 100. So in this area here, you're looking at only 5% of the detail of the coin. And here's an example of a poor 1 coin. This is a barber coin, and about the only thing you need to tell on a poor 1 coin is the date. If you can't read the date, we really can't put the coin in a holder. And you can see just enough of this coin to see that it's in 1896. So other than that, that's about all I can tell you about it. It's an 1896 barber. And again, poor 1 is not a coin we see very often. And the few that we do get submitted are usually submitted for a lowball type set found on our set registry. Moving up to Fair 2, okay? Here's a Fair 2 coin, and here the date is quite clear. You see the starting to see a little bit of the lettering on the front. There's still no lettering visible on the back, but you can sort of tell the basic design here at this point. It's a pretty well-worn coin, and as I said, the peripheral lettering is usually gone on the back. Now, About Good 3 is going to show 10 to 15% of the detail. That's going to be this range right in here. And you're going to see heavy wear into the tops of the lettering on the rims. Take a quick look at an About Good coin. And that's really what you look at here is usually the lettering around the rim. And on an About Good coin, it's still heavily worn into the lettering. You can read a lot of it. You can see America, dollar, maybe United, certainly In God We Trust here and some of the stars. But the lettering is quite heavily worn in. So this is About Good 3. And as I said, once again, it's about a 10 to 15% wear showing. Now moving on to Good, That includes two grades, good 4 and good 6. There you've got 15 to 25% of your detail here, and you're really here in good looking at the rim of the coin. A good 4 is going to have a little bit of wear into the tops of the letters. You should be able to read everything, but the rim's going to be slightly worn into the tops of the letters. By good 6, it's going to look more like the bottom here. You should have a absolutely complete rim, not worn into the letters by good 6. Okay? There may be a few weak spots, but it should be complete. Good shows a complete outline of the device, not much internal detail. But that's usually sort of the basic grade where most collectors would start collecting for a type set, would be good. Okay, bit of a misnomer, of course. Good isn't really so good, but moving to very good, that encompasses the numbers 8 and 10. And here's where you're going to get, roughly about 1/3 of the detail, between 20 and 40%. Of course, on Indian cents, B-nickels, seated and barber coins, a lot of the 19th century stuff, the traditional grading wisdom is that a few letters of liberty need to be showing. And once again, moving to our barber half as an example, you see the LI and the TY of liberty. Of course, now at this point, you've got full rims on both sides, fully legible lettering. You're starting to see a little internal detail here, certainly some feathers. The coin is still fairly flat, though, but I think it's sort of fair to say that about roughly a third of the original detail is visible. Of course, not much showing on the eagle. Feathers are mostly worn flat. Feathers down here are flat. The head is flat. But certainly the full outline of the coin is more than clear by very good. With fine, we also have 2 grades, 12 and 15, and that's kind of the halfway point on a coin. In other words, 40 to 60% of the detail is visible by the grade of fine. And once again, on these 19th century coins, Indian heads, B-nickels, barbers, seated stuff, the sort of requirement for fine is full liberty. We here at PCGS are somewhat forgiving, and a letter or two can be extremely weak for liberty. But here's a fine barber half, and you can sort of see L-I-B-E-R-T-Y. All the letters are there. The E and the R and the B are a little bit weak on the bottom. That would be a fine 12. By fine 15, we would not expect to see that kind of weakness. You got about half the feathers showing on the eagle. You're starting to see more than half the leaf detail here in the head. So once again, if you look at a coin and about half of it's gone, you're probably looking at about a fine. Now moving on to very fine, okay, you're looking here at around 2/3 to 3/4. VF is a big grade. It encompasses 4 grades, 20, 25, 30, and 35. And so for VF, let's take a look at a VF. Finer points are becoming clear, and the coin's starting to get a little bit of roundness. In other words, the cheek is looking sort of round. It's almost beginning to look a little bit 3D. You're starting to see a lot of your feathers, your shield, feathers on the neck, feathers at the bottom here at the tail feathers. So you're starting to see the coin as more and more as it was struck. And one thing I've often noted as a grader, by the time you get to VF, you're almost more looking now at what's missing rather than what's there. Okay? So by VF, you're starting to notice, that some of the hair above the eye is worn flat, or the feathers on the tips of the wings are worn flat. Whereas in the lower grades, you're more looking at what you can see. So VF sort of transitions now into what you can't see. A couple people were asking about grading mint state gold coins. And, mint state gold is similar to silver. We look for the same things. And in the full course, I've gone through grade by grade on a gold coin as well. This being just a preview, we don't have the time to go through numerous coins. but I went through a $20 gold Liberty, I think, and that was somewhat similar to a Morgan dollar, actually. So we really don't look at gold coins a whole lot differently. Moving to VF now, you're about 85 to 95% of the detail left. Probably 90% of your detail on average is going to be visible on an EF. And here's an EF. You see there's quite a bit of hair detail now between Liberty and the eye. You've seen some of the detail in the leaves. Most of the feathers now are visible. You've just got tiny areas of flatness at the tips. A little bit through the legs here, flatness, a little bit of flatness on the top feather here, tiny bit on the head. But, you know, looking at this coin, I think it's very fair to say 90% of what was on this coin when it was struck is still visible, maybe even as much as 95. And again, as you can see up here, EF takes up 4 grades, 40 and 45. And our final circulated grade we'll look at is going to be about uncirculated, AU, and that is in excess of 95%. By AU, you're not looking at a whole lot of wear. It's mostly going to be luster that you're going to be looking at and the very, very top areas of the coin. AU picks up 4 grades, 50, 53, 55, and 58. Again, looking for wear on this coin is tough. The neck and the head is sharp, the bottom feathers are sharp, the hair here is sharp. Maybe a trace of rub up here in the eagle's wing, as you can see. Maybe a little bit on the high point of the head here. Maybe a little bit on the talons. But this is a coin that is pretty much as struck and certainly didn't circulate for more than a few weeks in open circulation. So that's the circulated range of grades. And now let's take a look quickly at what the effective eye appeal on circulated coins are, because we've looked at wear. Eye appeal, we're going to look at a couple coins here. Here's a seated half. Okay, an 1874 Arrows half. But you notice some splotchy, uneven, dark toning on it. Sort of a dark, dingy background color of the coin. And you see some scratches in the devices. You see some scratches through the head, through the body, up the shield area here. It's just not a great looking coin. I mean, it's VF, but it sure ain't pretty. Now contrast with this coin. This coin is the same grade as the other coin in terms of sharpness. It's also a VF coin, an Arrows half. But you've got pleasing, even gray color, and you've got no marks or scratches on that coin to speak of. A nice, even, balanced look. So here are 2 seated halves, both VF, but I think 99 collectors out of 100 would much prefer the coin on the right. So this is the kind of coin that we're going to be looking for, and it's going to be very saleable in the market. Whereas a coin like this, there's a lot of collectors that are going to shake their heads and say, this coin's not for me. So this is where eye appeal comes in, grading circulated coins. Okay, here's another example. Here's a Mercury dime, okay? Both around VG sharpness, all right? But you see on this coin, the wear is, about fine condition in terms of wear. But once again, you've got splotchy, uneven, dark toning. It's not a pretty coin. People just, it's not the kind of, it's a rare date. It's a 16D, and it's going to run you, quite a few $100s. And if you're going to be buying a 16D for your set, most people aren't going to want one that looks like this. They're going to want one that looks like this. And you see here, again, only VG sharpness. In fact, it may not even be quite as sharp as the other coin. But it's got a very even, pleasing look. And it's a very balanced looking coin. And it's for the grade, it's very attractive, okay? For a 16D dime, well circulated, they don't come much more perfect than this. So once again, PCGS is going to give the nod to the coin on the right and maybe give this, a VG10, whereas this coin here may not even make VG simply because it's not the kind of coin people want to buy. It's a very hard to sell coin. Okay? Finally, we wrap up Grading 101 with tools and techniques of grading, and we discuss the optimal lighting that should be used in grading. We discuss the proper magnification that should be used in grading, and we discuss the methodology or the examination of grading. And these are three things that we go into a tiny bit of detail on, not a great deal, but we discuss what are the best things to use. Lighting, of course, we prefer incandescence. Magnification, for grading purposes, we don't like to go much above 5 power. Now, you can go up to 10 or 20 power if you're trying to authenticate, looking at a mint mark or looking for a variety. But for grading, you really don't want to look at use 20 power for grading. And for the examination methodology, of course, you want to move the coin under a light, under a single light source. Look carefully at the surfaces and the edges, okay? But mainly you want to keep the coin moving around, because very often a mark or a scratch will be invisible at one angle and then pop out at you at another angle. So those are all suggestions. I got another question that says, what tells you if a coin is a high-grade AU or a low-grade mint state coin? Obviously with AU you're going to be looking for traces of rub or flatness. A low-grade mint state coin is not going to have any wear on the coin, but it's going to probably have quite a few marks or other distracting things. And actually the tougher thing to tell is a weakly struck mint state coin from a circulated coin, because there sometimes you only have the same amount of detail visible on as a VF or XF coin on an UNC coin that's weakly struck. You remember that buffalo nickel that we saw? That coin was worn down to about a fine in terms of sharpness, but it was uncirculated. So that's something, again, that we cover in the full course. We have a section on that where I show numerous pictures. We got another question that says, are we able to do a webinar for paper bills? Yes, I have a good friend, Jason, that runs PCGS Currency, and I think I could persuade him to put on a webinar for grading paper money. So the answer is yes, I think it's something that we can do. No, it's not ready yet, but I think it's a great idea, and it's certainly an area that we will expand into. So we've used up our 45 minutes, so let me just remind you, this has been a presentation of the PCGS Collectors Education Program. We offer 3 courses: Grading 101, which you just had a preview of; Grading 102, where we talk about qualifiers. What are qualifiers? They are things like full bands, full head, deep mirror proof light, cameo, and color on copper, like red, brown, and brown. So those are the qualifiers we put on coins. We also discuss grading proof coins in Grading 102, which are a little different than grading mint state coins. We discuss modern coins, that would be the ultra high grade coins, mint state 67, 8, 9, and 70, which in the traditional, regular issue U.S. stuff, particularly 19th and early 20th century stuff, you don't get a lot of 69s and 70s in those coins. And we look at a few difficult to grade coins, which there are several series that are very challenging to grade. Things like Indian head gold coins, where the coin is basically struck below the surface. In other words, the design is impressed into the surface, and the high point of the coin is the surface itself rather than the device. So we discussed that in Grading 102. And then, of course, we have Grading 103. That is no grades, where we will not grade a coin due to some problem, and counterfeit detection. And that's taught by Mike Sherman, who is a longtime PCGS counterfeit detection expert. So all 3 of these coins will be available at the Long Beach show in September. They'll be live from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Saturday, September 28th, and you can register for these at the Long Beach Expo, by contacting our customer service number 1-800-447-8848, or email us at info@pcgs.com. The cost of the classes is $199. However, if you're a member of our PCGS Gold, Platinum, or Diamond Collectors Club, we will discount that to $149. And for having been to the webinar, if you reference webinar, we will give you an additional 10% off both of those prices. So again, we I realize we didn't cover everything in this. This was just a segment of Grading 101, not the full course. And if you found it interesting or want to learn more, we of course encourage you to come to the show. And at this point, I'd like to thank everyone very much for attending our first webinar. We'll be doing other ones for 102 and 103, and maybe for grading paper money as well. So if there are any other questions, I'll hang on for a minute and feel free to type in further questions. Can PCGS offer Meet the Expert sessions online? Yeah, I don't see why not. I think that's another great idea. This was our first experience using this webinar platform. And once again, I'd like to thank Steve Sloan, our Director of Marketing, for setting this up. And I certainly think, you know, getting used to this technology is something that once we're comfortable with it, I certainly think it's something we'll do more of. Okay, according to Steve, it said, will the webinar be able to be downloaded? The answer is yes, an email will go out. So there is the answer to that one.
Well, thank you, Mike. I think that's the conclusion of the questions.
Great, Steve. Thank you very much for hosting.
Yeah, no problem. Everyone, thank you. And again, there will be an email that goes out that gives you an ability to access this webinar through our website. And again, call customer service if you have any questions. We'd love to hear from you and your feedback. There's also an exit survey which we would like you to take to give us feedback on how we can improve the webinars in the future. So with that, thank you and have a great rest of your day.